videoing it, so hopefully we still have to get links up to the last 2 meetings, I think.
We have the last one up, but
Okay.
we're doing it
So
slowly, so
We've just been.
it takes a long time.
So anyhow, if someone missed it, they can watch the video of it. Tonight we're going to talk, I've got Matt Hines and Dave Wooden here. We're going to talk about police and fire issues. And then Bethany Smith is going to come up from the city attorney's office and talk about attorney issues. And then if you have any questions, I'm pretty sure that will all cover about an hour and a half. So, but there's no format. I mean, if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask it while someone's talking, and we'll do our best to answer. And we'll start with Matt.
Okay, great. Well, good evening. Thank you for coming. What I usually find in this format is I'll start with a little background information on the police department, and usually where the good exchange of information comes into play is with the questions, and that's where we started hitting the ball rolling. So, Dave Wooden is passing out some information, our annual report, some crime numbers from year to date, and then there's the third sheet is crime numbers 30-year trend. Kind of gives you some ideas. As Councilmember Schlechte said, mayoral candidate Schlechte.
Oh no, this is on council.
My name's Matt Hines. I've been with the Jackson Police Department for 26 years now. Last 8 years as chief. From Jackson, grew up here, live here, over at Cascades Drive. So I have a vested interest in the city and what happens in the city. I've been fortunate to have a very good command staff. At the police department, and then 4 years ago I was put in charge of the fire department, and I've been very blessed to have a very good command staff in the fire department because I was put in a situation where I had no knowledge on fire fighting, and they were very gracious in welcoming me down there, not giving me too much of a hard time, but at least keeping me out of trouble. And Dave Wooden actually handles all the daily operations in the fire end of it. I'm in charge of the numbers, Dave does everything else. It kind of gives you an idea of the structure. A couple misperceptions about the police department. When I started, we were 71 sworn. Today, we're at 47 sworn. What that means is 47 sworn from my position all the way down to the least senior police officer. So at any given time on the street, we average 5 or 6 cars covering the entire city of Jackson. 11 square miles, 5 or 6 officers handling the calls for service. Unfortunately for the city of Jackson, when you compare like-sized communities, we are at the top of the list for calls for crime numbers. And so we're a very busy community for our size. To give you an idea, when I say 5 or 6 cars working the street, single-person cars don't handle calls for service. If we get a shooting or if we get a stabbing, you automatically will take 2 or 3 cars out of service. So now you're down to 2 cars covering the city for anywhere from an hour to a couple of hours. So that kind of gives you some idea of the staffing levels we deal with. Many times I hear, well, you got 12 people out there covering the city. That's not true. It's on average 5 to 6 officers per shift. We work 12-hour shifts, 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And so any given time, 5 or 6 people. In the summertime is where we really pick up on the calls.
What number would you like it to be?
Well, I was really happy with 71 sworn when I took over. What I think, in my opinion, the minimum number to get by is 8 additional bodies. I think would be sufficient for us to at least maintain and deal with the call load that we have. The problem we run into right now is we're at 47 sworn. When we were 71 sworn and we lost people through retirement or they decided to get out of the job, we could absorb that loss for a period of time because we'd shuffle people around. Today we don't have that luxury. We have 47 sworn. I'm down 4 positions right now, so we're at 43. And the overtime is killing us. We have to staff those shifts with a certain number of people, and we're paying overtime to cover that. So we're trying very diligently to hire people. But as we were talking earlier, the problem we encounter now are kind of threefold. One is everybody's hiring in Michigan. We've made it through the downturn in the economy. We're starting to turn around. Everybody's hiring. The state police is running 2 police academies in a year. They suck up all the candidates. And so we're left trying to find candidates that want to come to Jackson to work. My experience in hiring has been most people want to work where they live or close to where they live. So when I hire people outside the area, they're here for 2 or 3 years. Many times they want to go back home. I just lost one to a female to King County because she was from that area. and I lost another gentleman from Kalamazoo because he was from there. And so we really strive to look at local candidates, but a lot of people don't want to go into law enforcement anymore because they invite them. Yes? As far as
Law enforcement is there.
is staffing wise,
Yeah, it is there.
we could do with a few more bodies. Like I said, I've asked and I pointed out to Councilmember Schlocke, I'd sure like 8 people at the police department. That's not even the fire department. And we'll get to the fire department in a minute, but with the police department, in my opinion, 8 more bodies would at least bring us up to the level where we can handle the calls that we have coming in. In regards to the fire department, we're at 24 firefighters right now. That's from Dave Wooden's position all the way down. 9 of those positions are on what is called a SAFER grant. It's a federal grant. That grant expires around the end of September, the first part of October. And I shouldn't say expired, I should say the money runs out. We exhaust all those funds that are coming. When that happens, yes,
I
sir.
was gonna say, you know, what these people are, one of my opinions, you guys need to put out there, is look, you guys need help, more people. You gotta let these people know when they vote for the villages, if we don't get them, their house insurance is gonna go up pretty soon. Fire and theft. Jesus.
And that message has been put out before, and the union also puts that message out from the fire. But when that SAFER grant expires or is exhausted in September, first part of October, we'll go down to 17 sworn, or 17 firefighters. 17 firefighters, that includes Dave Wood as deputy chief and the assistant chief, Chris Hermentanger, and then 15 on the floor. We have 3 shifts at the fire department, 24-hour shifts. That puts 5 guys on a shift. Now you have to think, 5 guys on a shift, one is probably going to be off at any given time for vacation, injury, training, what have you. So we can count on probably 4 per shift. Now, I'll let David get into the technical into fighting fires because that's way outside my bailiwick. But I have enough knowledge to know that the premise is when they go to fight a fire, you have to have 2 people outside. If they're going to be 2 people inside, it's called a 2 and 2 hour rule. So there's 4 people right there. You have a 5th person that should be in charge of the scene. So you have 5 people. You just exhausted your staffing levels for the fire department. So we have our issues at the fire department they're dealing with staffing. So combined, you're looking at an issue of staffing at both ends of the spectrum that at some point need to be addressed in some fashion. And we talked about this on the phone. How do you deal with that? No matter what you do, at the end of the day, it comes down to staffing. It comes down to bodies. You can buy new equipment, you can put a little bit more money into the place, but at the end of the day, what it comes down to is having a body in a uniform to handle the calls for service. And how do you accomplish that? And that, I think, is where the discussion needs to take place at the council level, because they're the ones that make a determination about the budget. And we put our budget request in, the city manager reviews it with council's input, makes a determination how the money's going to be divvied up, and then the budgets are adopted at the fiscal year.
What did the budget this year call for? Same, less, more, as far as number of officers?
No increase. Was the
No
same.
increase.
Yeah.
No increase, no decrease?
No increase for the police department, same numbers, 47 sworn. At the fire department, you lose the 9 SAFER guys, so we go down to 17 on October thereabouts. So SAFER guys were not in part of that general fund because they were grant funded. But yes, you lose 9 guys around October. So, questions up to this point?
Just, I want to make a point, though, that when the SAFER grant was put in place, it was understood by everyone that it would expire coming now. So this was,
Yeah, when we hired the 9 individuals on the grant, we were very clear and upfront with them that this was a grant-funded position with an expiration date, so they knew what they were getting themselves into. But at the end of the day, come October, those funds are gone, those individuals are laid off. The staffing will become an issue. Dave and I are going to meet tomorrow to talk about how do we deal with that loss of staff. And I can tell you right now, my position is going to be, when we respond to a call, a fire call, it's going to be defensive instead of offensive, which means they're going to stay outside the building to put water, saving exposure to the houses next to it instead of going inside to fight the fire. I am not going to put our employees in a position where they get hurt or run the risk of getting hurt if we don't have adequate staffing. Now, we do depend on Summit Township for automatic mutual aid. We get a call to fire, they come and assist us. But they have their own staffing issues they need to deal with, they have their own coverage issues they need to deal with. And so, at some point, you have to say, I can't depend on that on a regular basis, we need to deal with this issue with staff.
The safer guys have already survived one pink slip, if you will. They've been there for 4 years. When they had a 2-year run and the grant got renewed.
What happened was they were on a 2-year grant cycle. At the end of that period, we had funds left over from the grant because when we hired them at a lower wage than when we applied for the grant initially. There was some lag time. So we had funds left over. We requested the federal government if we could just keep those funds, expend them until the end, and they were gracious enough to say yes, go ahead and spend the money. And so that allowed us to bump it out. November, I think, was the initial date that they were going to expire to get laid off. And so we were able to keep it almost another year. But that was because of concessions made by the firefighters in negotiations.
So the track record, it looks like these come. You guys are obviously going to reapply, and it doesn't look good. I mean, is there a chance that?
It's federal government, I just don't know at that point. The grant will not become available until after the first of the year. Well, when they award it.
There's a lapse
FEMA's on their
period.
own thing.
So there will be some lapse time there, I'm almost certain. Dealing with the federal government, you just never know.
So Matt, what would be some of the solutions?
Well, the solutions, here's how the
Or
system
some
works.
options?
Here's how the system works, and we talked about it today. David and I make recommendations to our boss, the city manager. And then the city manager takes it up with council members about how they want to deal with this issue. As I pointed out earlier, at the end of the day, it comes down to staffing. Bottom line, staffing. You have to have bodies in uniforms to deal with the calls for service. So how do you deal with that? There's options available. Some are better than others, but all of them have their pluses, all of them have their minuses. One option is continue as business as usual. 47 at the police department, 17 at the fire department. Probably can't do that for too very long, especially the fire department, with their call volume and number of employees they have. I think I have serious concerns about running into burnout with those employees. You just can't run an agency with that few people with that number of calls for service for this city. Second option is public safety. That's been talked about before. That was voted on 3 years
Or
ago.
my term, I can think.
3 or 4 years ago. Interim city manager Warren Redondo was in at that time.
Was that, I was elected.
10.
I believe, yeah.
Public safety is an option. Is it a good option? Depends on where you sit, if it's a good option or not. It is an option. The problem with going to public safety is the vote of the people. People have to vote on giving council the authority to look at going to public safety. And that's written in the charter. And so that has to go to a vote of the people. Public safety, and when I say public safety, it's the model we would follow in Blackman. Everybody's cross-trained from the top to the bottom. Some pluses, some minuses to that option. Another option that we talked about, and there are a lot of options out there. One option is do away with the police department, combine with the sheriff's department, have one police agency. There's pros and cons to that. I've had conversations with the sheriffs about that. Again, pros and cons to that on both sides. All these decisions are political decisions. I can tell you right now, all of them are political decisions. David and I can make any decision work. Making it work is the easy part. The political part is going to be the tough part. And it's a decision council and the city manager has to make and has to buy into to make it happen.
Volunteers and other.
Volunteers is another option for actually both agencies, police department and fire department. Summit Township has volunteers, not very many anymore, but they do have volunteers. Many of the police agencies in the township have volunteers or part-timers, paid part-time, that they work with. Both of those options are contractual. They have to be negotiated. You can't just come in and say, David, we're going to give you 12 volunteers to fight fires. Or Matt, you're going to hire some volunteers or some paid part-timers to work at the police department. I've talked to our union at the police department about paid part-time. Obviously, as you would expect, some of the members are a little, we don't want to do that because once we open that door, then you're really going to start moving in that direction. I would not do that, but someday I'll be gone and some other chief will be here. They may decide they want to do that. Fire department, volunteers is an option. My understanding is that Summit Township has a hard time recruiting volunteers now with everybody's busy schedule. Usually when you get the calls, it's late at night when people are sleeping, but it is an option. But again, you have to negotiate. We can't just go in there and say, hey, let's go with the volunteer force and start working. Another option is contract out the fire department. Go to Summit Township and say, we'll pay you so much to fight our fires. Or for us to go to Summit and say, you pay us so much and we'll fight your fire. There's another option on the table. Many strings attached to that. And again, it's an issue of negotiations, it's an issue of contracts, it's an issue of unions. But again, at the end of the day, it comes down to money and bodies. And what is the best option to pick? I'm sure there are other options out there. That,
What about regional
regional?
fire department?
Regional is obviously another option that I really like, is combining resources of Summit Township, making a municipal fire department, if you will. That seems to be a little bit easier to do than in the law enforcement aspect of it. But I do like the concept of combining with Summit Township and having one fire department for a large metropolitan area.
Didn't we, wasn't there an automatic aid agreement that was?
Yes.
And that has fizzled, is that fizzled completely? We use
No.
mutual aid?
We still have automatic mutual aid with Summit Township.
We have automatic mutual.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have automatic aid with Summit Township. So when we get a major fire, they automatically come in to assist us. Blackman Township used to be participant in that, and they backed out, and they're just mutual aid now. Mutual aid means they get a call, and we arrive, and we have to call and say, please send us a truck from your department because we need more help. So there's a little bit of difference. What it comes down to is time. It's quicker to get an automatic response, so you know they're already on their way. So when we arrive, we know we're already going to have another 1 or 2 bodies there versus arriving, having to call and wait for other people to get there. Becomes extremely important when you go down to 17 guys.
Was there any reason that obviously we only used to be part of that, and then they merged with Blackman, and Blackman, where they give a reason, like, hey, we don't feel we're getting bang for the buck, or was there?
You know, that's a good question. Dave, do you have the answer to that? I'm not sure.
From what I understand, Blackman pulled out of it because they felt they were giving a lot more than they were receiving. You know, this whole thing was created in 2005 because of the loss of Captain Thornton in Summit Township. And it was done that with levels of expectations and service at the time. Unfortunately, that's gotten convoluted and twisted around to lose its primary mission. That was to provide more firemen on a scene to increase the safety. Leone couldn't pony up to the agreement, so they stepped out of it in 2005. Blackman, after that, felt that they were not being utilized appropriately, and they stepped out of it. But we've maintained that agreement with Summit Township, and we're going.
So there are a lot of options out there on how to deal with these staffing issues. And again, each option has pros and cons, strings attached, issues you have to deal with. None of them are easy solutions. None of them will happen overnight. It will take time, politics is involved, funding is involved, so it will be a long process no matter what we decide to do, short of continuing as we are to deal with this issue. This is not an uncommon issue across the state. I mean, this is not unique to Jackson. There are jurisdictions across the state that are dealing with these issues. And so when I go to chiefs conferences, we're always talking about these various issues and how we're dealing with it. You know, you've seen police agencies dissolve because they don't have the staffing. And they either combine with another agency or they contract with the sheriff's department. So, any questions up to this point? No? Okay. Dave, you want to give a little bit of insight on the fire engine?
Yeah, I just elaborate on a few points. Like Matt was saying, we've both got some of the same challenges: money, staffing, and it still takes bodies to put people in jail, it takes bodies to put fires out. When I came in the department in 1985, there was 62 of us. Now we're at 24, we're at 26, we're going to be going to 17. Our biggest concern is, you know, when Matt uses the example, it takes 2 or 3 officers to handle a robbery. That's very true from a safety standpoint. It takes us 12 people by NFPA guideline to attack a low occupancy dwelling. That's a single 2-person or 3-family, single 2-family or 3-family dwelling. They recommend 12 firefighters and a battalion chief. we've worked around a variety of things to make that work, but my biggest concern is we're running out of options. We're down to the bone marrow, basically. We've got an exceptional relationship with Summit Township. I would like to think that we could put together a merger with Summit and/or Blackman, the only Napoleon. The fire service across the state of Michigan is struggling. The state's mandates for training requirements. The fact that almost every household now has to have a 2-income source for survival. We don't have the ability to hang out at the fire station like we did when I was first in the business. We have more family commitments, we're more involved with our kids, as we should be. Chiefs across the state of Michigan are struggling to get bodies, whether they're career, whether they're volunteer, part paid. There's probably one chief in Jackson County that's got people he's turning away, and he's a very blessed man, he's a good chief, he's lucky. But I'm hearing a lot of departments in the county are struggling to get people, even on-call paid, or as we call them, volunteers. So we've looked at that avenue. One of the things that we just went to was a NAVA system. In fact, council, we were blessed to be go with that, or authorize that last night. That'll give us a more of a geographic response. It will partner with our mutual aid agreements, which means that we provide aid to any department in the county and help if they ask, and it won't decimate our services to do that, and they'll give us back. Mavis is set up to be a more geographical positioning and response to fires. Much like our AMA now, we would babysit the closest 3. We're working through some of the process of getting that implemented, and there's not going to be any big changes to what we see now. It's the start of a process of figuring out a sustainable fire model for 5 years and 10 years down the road. Because, I'll be honest with you, the city is struggling for financial position right now, there's no doubt about that. But what's going to drive this is the Liberties, the Napoleons, the Rise. They're all of a sudden one day not going to have enough people to put a fire truck on the road. They're struggling now, and the county is going to end up saying, we got to fix this. And they're going to look to the city, and Summit, and Spring Arbor, who've got a working model to help that sustain until they can come up with a model to move forward. And that's what we're trying to work on now, is whether it's a county merger or metropolitan. I mean, we're working well together now with a lot of resources. We're buying hose together with other departments, but it still goes down to the fact that we need bodies to do the job. Some of the things that we've identified as areas that we are lacking in is that we've had to cut back our resources on the company inspections. We're doing some, we just can't get to them all. Our pub ed programs are suffering. You see our arson numbers are up this year. Our juvenile fire center numbers are up. We've addressed it. We've initiated a K2 initiative in the schools. We're hitting every K1 and 2-year class every year. So by the time those kids come out of 2nd grade, they are sick and tired of hearing from us because they've had us 3 times. But we're focusing on public education in the home. That's one of the things we're doing to try to help address some of those issues. We're working with City Hall on blight issues because an abandoned dwelling is a source for criminal activity, whether it is drug dealing, transient people who build campfires in there, arson, and so we're working with them on a lot of that stuff as much as we can.
How do you feel about that 500,000 that went instead of funding more firemen to vacant like houses?
How do I feel about it? You know, there are priorities that have been established by council based on the whole picture. I know there's firefighters that don't agree with everything I do. What's happening and why that's happening, I don't know.
Because the majority of police calls are houses that people are living in, not vacant abandoned houses.
You know, I think there's probably a bigger percentage of that than you think, because a lot of those vacant
More
lots
crimes
have crime
happen
tax.
in interior.
But I think they've got a tough job to do, and they've established their spending priorities based on their needs and their goals. I just hope we can make this work, because I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, in regards to the demolition project, I'm a firm supporter in that. You can drive around now and start to see the physical appearance of the city changing. And because of reach of the numbers where you can start to see these vacant lots. So,
I can see, I live in Frogtown, I can watch my wife come out of Sears.
so I think it is a worthwhile project. This is the first time in my career where somebody's actually taken the initiative and said, look, we need to start doing something about this. Be it right or wrong, if you agree or disagree, but a decision was made and a plan was put in place and we're moving forward with it. My hope is that it will soon start to trickle off and we start to kind of get a maintenance program, if you will, where you've reached the point.
Too many weeds and trash.
Well, not necessarily I'm talking in regards to as the homes become vacant, you start to destroy them in a more timely fashion, where now we're playing catch up. And I can tell you, we have crimes in those vacant houses all the time. We just had 2 armed robbers at pizza delivery guys where they were sent to vacant houses and the guys were on the porch and they walked up to the porch and they got a gun stuck in their face and they got robbed. Still haven't solved those. We're still looking at those. But they do occur. We had a homicide a few years ago where we found a very young female in the house after a number of weeks in the summertime where she was killed in the house. Crimes do occur in those
You would
houses.
have to agree with me, though, the majority of crimes happen in homes that are occupied.
Well, absolutely. I mean, nothing happens if a house is vacant.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying that we, at least I do, I'm not speaking for Dave, I support that program because it's a worthwhile program to get those houses down. If you haven't been in some of these houses, and unfortunately I don't think we'll be able to make the arrangements for you to go in some of these houses.
I
But
live in
some
one
of
of
these,
those houses.
you're living in a nice house, I'm talking about these.
No, I
vacant-
had, my house was sitting down, it was vacant.
I don't know what your house is, but I'm just telling you, I've been in some of these vacant condemned houses that I wouldn't put a dog in these houses. And so it was worthwhile to get these houses down and get them out of there. There comes a point where we get to the point where now we can start rehabbing. What I look for now is what's the plan next? What comes after? We have these vacant lots. And now, we don't all own all those lots, but you can speak to that. City owns some of them, there's still a lot of them that are privately owned that we can't do anything with. But my question becomes, what's the next step? What comes now? Now that we got these houses down, we're beginning to build these large number of vacant lots, what's the plan now? And that becomes an issue for the council to do.
One of the problems we have, where you tear down the houses, that is great, let's change the fire and the furnace.
Yes.
But now we got more drug problems, what to do with it? I got 3 of them in the neighborhood.
More what problems?
It's my house,
More what problems?
drugs.
With vacant lots?
No, in the houses, because they're going from the condemned, low income.
Oh, moving into the
Nice
houses.
neighborhoods.
One of the things that you're gonna find with this, the Blight project, is it's a slow process. It's, you gotta look at it as being like the rotation of the moons is on 7 years, and I'm not saying it's a 7-year project. But the gain we're gonna see on that is gonna be a slow gain. There is good at the end, it's just slow getting things moving sometimes, and seeing that result. It's just like if we were to stop educating the kids in school, we wouldn't see an impact right away, but we'd see that eventually. So there's definitely advantages and needs for the Blight project. Finding that level of moderation to fit the whole picture is something that council is tasked with.
Before there was no burning, outdoor burning, as far as these wood grills. Now they have them. And I have this same property, same drug deal, the neighbor burning on a wooden deck against the wooden fence against my garage. Fire department's been out there a couple times now. But how much money is wasted on that by just doing away with it again?
There's no doubt that it takes some of our time.
I save some houses too, by getting rid of it.
The ordinance requires it to be at least 15 feet from the property line, so if you've got some issues with that, all you gotta do is call 911, and we'll come down, they can put it out, and they can remove it, and if it's something that we see a repeat offense, we'll issue a citation, because it's a misdemeanor in the city ordinance. And we normally do that, we try to be very sensitive and work with people as much as we can, but you reach a point in time where you just have to say, okay, we're at the end of the road. And we do that.
Any other questions for us?
Hey man, is the
Yes.
city financially not well enough to try, I can't speak for the city, only for the county, but as far as the benefit package, and I know, you know, we would fight it every year, but retirement was a problem, and that drew away a lot of people to find jobs. So is the city the same way, where I know it's tough to fight with unions and council and try and get the benefit package, especially retirement up better, to try and bring more people interested in staying instead of leaving?
It's too early to tell. The city changed the benefit package for new hires in 2012. I think it was 2012. My group came in under a pension program where you work 25 years and you're eligible to retire with full pension and benefits. That has gone to the wayside. New hires after 2012, they now have what we call a hybrid system. They have a little bit of defined contribution and a little bit of defined benefit. So it reduces the city's liability long term. They also do not receive retirees' health insurance. They get a health savings account. The city contributes a little bit, and the employee contributes a little bit. So when they reach 25 years, they have the health savings account to buy insurance. And so the city has been able to negotiate some changes on the police end of it to deal with that long term, but that's something you're going to see 20 years down the road start to feel the effect. You're not going to start to feel it in a year or two. I don't get the sense it has impacted our recruiting too much at this point. One of the things that new guys like is it's portable. They take that money with them after they're vested. I think the vesting period is 3 years now, if I'm not mistaken. So if they decide they want to go work at another police agency, they can take that money with them. Unlike mine, it's tied to the city, and so once I was vested, I had to stay to get my full 25 years to be eligible to retire. So
they weren't finding the money, is it gonna, I know there was an issue, like, it's more like the stock market.
like a what?
Like the stock market, as far as that savings plan. It's also like considered the stock market, so down the road, if the market's down and it isn't making the money, and you may have no money at the end, and I know that's what we lost people for.
Again, because of the hybrid system, they get a little bit of a defined contribution, which is a 401k in effect. And so, depending on how they invest it, will depend on how they do. They then get a portion which is a defined benefit, which says if you work 25 years, you have a multiplier of, I think it's 1.5%. You get that when you retire, which is around 50%, 55%. So, I don't get the sense it's impacted hiring too much. Other agencies have gone farther in their cuts, and that has impacted those agencies, and we see that. And so I remind my boss, don't go there, because you will start to see a decline in applications because of that. But it's always a concern. It's always a balancing act, trying to figure out where we're going to be with it. You know, when I started, the common knowledge was, if you go into the police department, fire department, you may not make a lot of money, but you have good benefits. And that was a huge plus. It is a huge plus today. You're starting to see that dwindle down now, and you're starting to see less and less people willing to go into the police department or the fire department because the wages are lower, especially in the fire department. They make huge concessions with new hires, and I think they make $13 an hour, $14 an hour.
Starting salary is $36,000.
So for new firefighter. So it's always a balancing act. It's always trying to figure out, and of course, again, it comes down to dollars. At the end of the day, it's how much do you have in your general fund, and it's council's responsibility. How are we going to divvy it up? And police and fire is the biggest part of the general fund, about 60%, 58 to 60%, which is the norm with other municipalities. So it becomes a political issue, and how you're going to divvy up those limited funds and where you're going to put them.
When your tax dollar has gone down as a result of lower taxable value, you have less money to deal with to provide services, and which our services are police and fire, leaf pickup, street cleaning, you know, what is the priority? So, and our tax, I think, will go up July to cover your pension fund. The tax, the 345 Act goes up to 6.33, which it started at, I think, 0.75%.
David could speak to that.
You know, I was put in 72, and I've only been on board 21 years, but yeah, I think it was originally $1 mil. But you know, there's a lot of history there with rollovers from old plans that weren't funded, and so there's a lot of history there. And some occasional bad market issues. I mean, we've done phenomenal with our investments. We got 24% last year. But we have had years where we're down, and coincidentally, when somebody's eligible to retire, you may have to liquidate some of those plans, or those investments, to pay the retirement, because when they are eligible to retire, they may want to go.
But if we can find a way to minimize these legacy costs, then that will free up some money to add more manpower.
Now, on the other side of that right there, wasn't there just a slight increase on the city hall bond?
That goes, it had decreased the previous budget year though, so apparently that fluctuates on something.
The bond payments fluctuate from year to year.
But it was nominal. But and the Act 345 went from 6.28 to 6.33. Still nominal, but it's still, no matter how you cut it, it's still, that one hasn't gone down. Where the bond, the office one or the building one had gone down here.
Any other questions for us? I would like to offer, I don't think they do ride-alongs in the fire trucks. The police department, we do ride-alongs, so if you're interested, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just didn't know.
I didn't know. Learn something new every day. Police department, if you're interested, come down to a ride-along. We always welcome the public to come down, get exposure to what we do, how we do it, what it's like out on the street. Anytime, come down to the station, talk to Lieutenant Simpson, and you can ride any time of the day, night, mornings. We're open all the time, so some people know what it's like, and I certainly offer that to anybody.
Citizens Police Academy.
We do a Citizens Police
Academy.
Academy.
Susan Murdy was at it. It is very eye-opening, at least in my opinion, very eye-opening.
We do that once a year, usually in the fall, and it's 10 weeks, one night a week for 10 weeks, and we just go over general topics to educate the public on the different aspects of law enforcement. So we partner with the Sheriff's Department to do that. And speaking of partnering with the Sheriff's Department, we do quite a bit with the Sheriff's Department, more so now than ever because of the downturn in the economy. And so we share a lot of services with the Sheriff's Department. Steve and I talk all the time. We're always brainstorming about what else can we share to minimize the overhead for both agencies. We have a combined SWAT team. We handle evidence for the Sheriff's Department, so they drop it off at our place. We process the evidence for them. They do our traffic crashes, fatal accidents. We get about one a year on average. They get a dozen plus, so they have all the experience. And it'd take us 6 hours to do it. They come in and they knock it out in about 2 hours. They do the central dispatching. When you pick up the phone, it all goes over to 911 Dispatch Center on Lansing Ave now. They just moved it. And they handle all the dispatching for the county as a whole, which is a huge benefit because you go to other counties in Michigan, they won't work well together. Or in the east part of the state, some of those counties over there, they'll have 15 or 20 dispatch centers in the county because nobody wants to work together. So they do a very nice job with the dispatch center here, and we're very appreciative of that. County handles all our booking. We used to have a cell at the police department, and Dan Hines was gracious enough to say, when he was sheriff, we'll take over your booking for you. And so we got out of the booking business, which is a huge liability, so we're very happy to get rid of it. So we have a Major Crimes Task Force, which is made up of the county, the city, Blackman, and the state police. So we have a major crime, a homicide, an arson, something along that lines. We can call those resources to come in and help us, so we work together. So we're talking all the time. Now that may sound like, well, that seems like common sense to do that. You go over near Detroit area, they won't even sit in the same room together. They won't even talk to each other for one reason or another. Long history over there. And so when I travel the state, I'm just baffled in this day and age, they're not working closer together to deal with these issues. And the same goes with the fire department. Very close working relationship with Summit Township. We're training together, we're getting the same policies, so they know what each other's policies are, so when they go out there to help them, they know how people are going to respond. So we strive all the time how to reduce our overhead and reduce our costs, operating costs, so we can focus on putting bodies out there to do the job.
Jackson County is one of the few counties where every fire department participates in a mutual aid agreement. We're definitely the minority of counties across the state that can even, and that's it's down and share a cup of coffee, that was amazing.
Especially on the evening shift, you might see county or state cars in the city. It's because we need their assistance when we get bogged down with calls. Good example, they had a bank robbery in Blackman Township today, about 1 or 2 o'clock. And we ended up going out there to assist Blackman. County was out there, state was out there. And so that's why you might see city or state cars or county cars in the cities, because we requested them to come in and assist us with whatever we may be dealing with. Not uncommon in the summertime, especially when we get calls with large fights, 200 to 300 people. We need all the resources we can get so they can govern. So.
What about body cameras?
Body cameras, yes, body cameras, big thing right now. We have in-car cameras in all the cars. Our policy is the car does not go on the road unless it has a functioning camera. So the camera picks up 90% of what we usually need. They have body mics, so that works to about 1,000 feet line of sight. If you go in a building, obviously that's going to be reduced. So that picks up all the audio that the officers when they're having an encounter with a citizen. That works about 90% of the time. The push right now in the country is body cams. I'm not opposed to body cams. I think they have their place, but they're limited. People think that's the end-all be-all. That is not, because those are limited in what they capture as well. But more importantly, what's going on with body cameras right now is the constitutional issues. And people don't think about these things. If I go into your house and you're there as a visitor, what kind of constitutional protections do you have from showing up on my video? And those questions have not been answered. What if I go to somebody's house and you say, you're not coming to my house with that camera? Those questions haven't been answered. One of my responsibilities as chief is to make sure I don't put the city in a position to get sued. And so I'm not just rushing down the street right now to get body cameras because I want to have answers to those questions. And there's a lot of people looking at them. I'm waiting to see if legislation is going to come out. I'm waiting to see if court decisions are going to come out in regards to body cameras. But I do like the idea of body cameras. There is a place for body cameras, but it's not the end-all be-all. It won't solve everything. And the final issue is the cost. The initial purchase of a camera isn't bad. They're anywhere from $300 to $800. It's the storage of the data. And our cars, we store our data for 3 years because that's the time period you can file a federal lawsuit. We have terabyte servers, big servers that store all this data. The body cameras probably are going to store more because they're going to be high definition and they're going to be on more. How do you store that? Where do you store that? Do you store it on-site, off-site? Do you store it off-site? You got to pay for that. So there are a lot of questions that need to be asked and answered. We're in the research phase. We look at them. I think we're close to identifying which one we want to go to when the time comes that we go to them. But we're starting to crunch the numbers now, put them together. But body cameras, certainly we're looking at them. But I'm more so concerned about the constitutional issues, the questions about people's privacy and how to protect them.
It would be a fair statement to say if we can't afford police officers and fire personnel, that we're not going to be able to afford body cameras. That's tight reading.
No, not really, because many times you get federal grants. Initial purchase of body cameras and software might run $30,000, $40,000. That's a one-time cost. The bigger issue is the storage. And how do you do that? How much does it cost? So not necessarily. One lawsuit easily costs you a couple $100,000. So you really got to start to weigh what are the factors. But that's always an issue.
Similar to Safer Grant, it's not always going to be.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's always an issue. When we went through layoffs in 2011, I think, we laid off 10 officers. And then we turned right around, we had to update our computer system. And I got all sorts of pressure from the officers. Why are you laying them off and then turn around and buying these computer systems for the cars? Well, the simple fact is, you still have to have functioning, working equipment for the guys that are left. Am I happy about it? No, I'm not happy about it. I don't want to lay anybody off. But unfortunately, you have to take a look at your financing and figure out where you're going to be able to staff, but you still got to have the equipment. We're purchasing a fire truck. And it's a nice fire truck. I've never purchased one before, so it's quite an experience for me, but it's a fairly cheap one. But we heard,
Fairly cheap, but how much?
Dave Wooden heard some of the comments, why are we buying a fire truck if we're laying off safer guys? Well, the simple fact is, for the guys that are left, they still need a fire truck to respond to their calls for service. And the fire truck we had was a hazard. The frame rusted through, and the mechanic said, you can't put this back on the road. And so we had to start the process of purchasing a fire truck. So it's always a balancing act. It's always trying to figure out We have a certain amount of money, where are we gonna spend it, how are we gonna spend it, what's the best way to get you the service you want at the cheapest price possible. So, anything else?
I've read online that we're number 50th of the worst, most dangerous city in the United States right now, along with Flint and Detroit and Lansing. You know, and when you talk about Michigan, what are some things that are being proactive to maybe address the exceedingly high crime rate we have right now in Jackson? Because right now what I see, because of lack of staffing, I believe, is that you're going to calls all the time and that's what's occupying your time versus, I don't know, maybe follow up, maybe identifying certain homes you always go to because the certain people are always doing the same things. Is there any kind of program or anything that's trying to address our high crime rate that we have right now in Jackson?
Usually what happens is, first of all, that number of 50, I don't take put a lot of value in those reports because depending on how you want it to read, you can put the information in you want. So, if you go to Flint, we're definitely not a Flint, we're definitely not a Salem.
No, they're in the top 10. We're 50.
But you bring up a very valid point. What we usually find occurs is when we start to see spikes in crime, we look at the numbers every month. I look at the numbers every month before they come out, and I look at it and say, okay, are they on the norm, or is there a spike? If there's a spike, why is there a spike? Did we report it wrong, or is there indeed a problem? What we commonly find, and we're dealing with this right now, is there's individuals that are causing the problems. I'm a firm believer that 10% of the population causes 90% of our problems. And if you identify those 10% and you focus on those 10%, you're going to have a major impact on crime. We are dealing with that currently with 2 gangs in the community. We've identified a number of people that are involved with those gangs, and we're working with the state police, the sheriff's department, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms to put cases together to prosecute them. And I'll tell you one thing that gets their attention quicker than anything is when you show up at their door with a federal agent, and they realize they're looking at a lot of years in prison in the federal system versus the state system, and you start to see results. We work with a prosecutor with the names that we've identified to say, look, no deals on these individuals because we're trying to address the problem. And that is a very effective way to approach the problem. The problem is it's long term. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes weeks and weeks and months to build some of these cases. But that's an accurate perception.
The other perception is, and I live in a high crime neighborhood, so I see this firsthand. There's also animosity towards neighbors because they're doing that down the street, they're doing that, and I can only imagine there's a lot of calls because my neighbors are making a lot of noise, we got a dog issue, domestic abuse, those types of things that aren't necessarily felonies. I think that Jackson is very high in those, and you would know better than me because I haven't actually looked at the statistics. What can we do as a community to lower those calls to you or lower those issues? Because right now there's a lot of animosity between neighbors because of dog record, just things that make their life miserable as a neighbor.
I don't know if I have a solution to that. I mean, it becomes an issue of have we lost civility in the community? And not just Jackson, when across the country. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I'm a firm believer that when I first started, the big craze was crack. And in '91, we had 14 homicides. 13 of those were because of crack cocaine. And that's when we started to see young teens having kids using, and the teens were using crack. And 15 years later, we started to see the results of that because we were dealing with those babies that were in a very poor environment, and they unfortunately ended up getting involved with law enforcement in a bad way. So this becomes a community issue. We can't solve these problems. We can't arrest our way out of these problems. It just isn't feasible. It's not realistic. We're putting too many people in prison as it is. It becomes a community issue. It becomes an issue of civility and being able to work out your problems on your own and call the police. You would be shocked at the type of calls we get. We get calls because Johnny won't get up and go to school. They call 911 saying Johnny won't go to school. What do you want us to do about it? You haven't dealt with the problem for 10 years and you want us to deal with it? And you wonder why people dislike law enforcement? So those are the type of calls that we get. We get calls from drug dealers saying, he ripped me off of my dope.
They don't watch Judge Judy.
But just to give you an example of how bizarre some of these calls become, and many problems could be resolved if people just sat down and talked to one another. But, I mean, there are numerous factors that come into play here. There's no way law enforcement is going to deal with these
Do you
problems.
know any other agencies that do exactly what you just said, maybe throughout the United States, maybe it would be a good model to look at, that starts talking about resolution between neighbors or between parents and child, instead of calling, because I think a lot of your time is spent on calls that aren't necessary where my life is in danger.
Not that I'm aware of. We're always looking at that, but not that I'm aware of.
Neighborhood watch programs.
Yeah, neighbor watch helps.
The only ones that
But we just seem, people are so busy with work and job and kids. It's tough. But I'll tell you, law enforcement is going to solve problems. We're just one aspect of the criminal justice system. We pick up the pieces. We pick up the pieces after the fact. So, any other questions? I know that the city attorney wants to get up here and talk about her stuff. So, big decision last night in the council meeting that she might want to talk about. I don't know. Just, Any other questions for me or David? If you think of some later down the road, don't hesitate to stop by and call us. I encourage you to come down to a ride-along. It's an eye-opener for a lot of people. Do it in summertime, don't do it in February because nothing happens in February. Other than house fires. So, thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Hello everyone, I'm Beth Smith, I'm the city attorney, and I have a little PowerPoint presentation that I'll put on, maybe to help you understand a few issues that are going on in the city right now.
Hold on one second. I know there's a couple of you that didn't sign in. I would appreciate you just signing in, and if you don't want to give me your contact information, not a problem. If you found out about this via email, then I already have your information. If you got my Blackboard Connect, then I can put you on an email list, and you'll get the updates that we have. Yeah, so you got to, but at least give me your contact information. I already have yours, but I want to know that you were here. So, with that said, go ahead, Bethany.
Okay, I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Bethany Smith, I'm the city attorney. I've been with the city for 5 years now. I've been the city attorney for 1.5 years after the retirement of Mr. Giglio. I'll tell you a little bit about our office. We have myself, we have 2 other full-time attorneys, and 1 part-time attorney, as well as 2 administrative staff. And you might be surprised to know that lawsuits are the least of what we do at the city attorney's office. We keep ourselves very busy with many other items of business that concern the city. Things like contracts, we review all of those, we draft many of them, we negotiate them. We take care of all the insurance issues for the city. We have an administrative court called the Administrative Hearings Bureau that adjudicates blight violations. We do about 150 cases a month. We also prosecute many misdemeanors that occur in the city. We do pass some of those on to the county prosecutor's office, but most of the misdemeanors that occur in the city will go through our office. So we are extremely busy, in addition to many other things that we do. But I do invite you, if you ever have a question with anything going on in the city and you can't seem to find an answer through another department, I invite you to call me and I will do the best that I can to help find some sort of resolution for you. It's just another sort of role that my office has taken on. So we'll call around, we'll talk to whoever we need to talk to try and find an answer. But I know what's on everyone's mind right now is the big stormwater class action lawsuit. I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about it and maybe how it got to this point, so I thought I might explain that to everyone. In hopes that you'll have a better understanding of, I'm sure you probably saw the MLive articles about the amount of attorney fees that were spent, and I know we've had some criticism about that, so I'm hoping I can explain that to everyone. So we'll get going with the slides. We actually had 3 lawsuits with 4 different plaintiffs in the stormwater litigation. The first case that was filed was County of Jackson versus City of Jackson. And the county said, your stormwater fee that you're charging is a violation of what's called the Headley Amendment. The Headley Amendment says, it's a constitutional amendment, it says you cannot charge a tax unless the voters approve it. So with these Headley violation cases, what the court has to do is determine whether a charge is really a charge or a fee, or do the elements of it seem to be more of a tax. Therefore, they should have been voted on and they're illegal. And under the Headley Amendment, if you're found to have violated that, you have to pay back 1 year's worth of the fees that you illegally collected. So the County of Jackson filed their suit, and then Jackson Coffee Company and Klein Brothers kind of jumped on board and also joined in the suit. So that was our second and third plaintiffs. And then we had another gentleman, Mr. Mike Wisniewski, that filed his own suit later on when we get down to the class action part of it. And then Panzica versus City of Jackson is the class action lawsuit. So basically what happened was, as we talked about just a second ago, the county alleged that we violated the Headley Amendment by charging the stormwater fee. And the county only sought relief for itself in that suit. It didn't ask for any of the fees to be refunded to any of the other payers of the stormwater fee. And so, and that was the case with Jackson Coffee Company and Klein Brothers as well. They only sought relief for themselves.
Can everybody hear her?
Yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, I had not held a meeting here before, and I tried to
I
spread
just
the
want to speak up a
right,
little bit.
having businesses in other places so we can support the community.
I'll use my yelling at the child in the yard. Okay, so these cases oftentimes start out at the Court of Appeals, so that's who made the decision. And the plaintiffs did win at the Court of Appeals. We can no longer collect the stormwater fee, which brought in about $1.3 million a year. That money was used for various things, such as leaf collection, street cleaning, catch basin cleaning, and a number of other things. So once we could no longer collect that charge anymore, we had to stop offering those services, or greatly reducing them, because we just didn't have the funds coming in anymore to pay for those things. However, we did still have money left over in the stormwater account, which I'll get to later. We used to pay back some of the stormwater refunds at the onset of the class action lawsuit. But we were also ordered, because this is a Headley Amendment lawsuit, to pay the other side's attorney's fees, and that was a very large amount. We had two different attorneys, the county's attorney and then Brian Surgener for Jackson Coffee Company and Klein Brothers. Together, we had to pay them $190,000. Those were their fees and their costs together. But if anybody wants to see it, I did bring a breakdown of all that with me, because I just know people are very interested in that. Then the second phase came in. Once we had lost the initial stormwater case, Brian Surgener, who was the attorney for Jackson Coffee Company and Klein Brothers, brought a separate suit, and this is a class action lawsuit. And a gentleman named Mr. Panzica, who does not live in the city, but owns some property in the city, he was the class plaintiff. That means he says, my interests are the same as everyone else's interests. In other words, every other person that got a stormwater charge, and I think I could represent them best. So the court okayed that for him to represent everybody, and the case went forward. The city did not dispute that we illegally charged the fee. We didn't dispute the Court of Appeals decision. We never spent any money or time litigating that issue again. We simply said, yes, we know we owe the money back, but we need to discuss how and when we can pay it so that we don't impact other city services and have to cut more things. So that was really the focus of this phase 2 in the class action lawsuit, was how and when do we pay the money back so that we don't have to cut other services.
Excuse me, Beth,
Yes.
before you change that screen, it says all residential accounts repay voluntarily.
We did.
Weren't you ordered by the Court of Appeals to pay the account?
No, there had been no order at that point. We voluntarily paid that money back. And we paid that back. We had some money still left over from the stormwater initial collected fees, and then we had to kick in some additional money, so.
Plus all the attorney fees were paid, correct?
Yes. And then we had to pay back about $900,000 total in refunds, and we also had to pay class counsel's attorney's fees and costs, which we are still doing today. We'll probably get one more request for fees from him, so. So the consequences of the litigation, the city can no longer charge the stormwater fee. Leaf pickup was canceled for everyone. We're trying to bring that back in some sort of different form now so that you still have that service. It's not going to be the same service that you had before where you could shoot them out to the street, but you're going to be able to bag your leaves in a bag provided by the city, and we'll have someone come along and collect those for you. Street sweeping and catch basin cleaning were greatly curtailed, and the city, we're trying to ramp back up again, but there was a real effort, I think last month and the month before, to get the streets clean, so.
Yeah, they are sweeping the streets. South of Michigan Avenue, they work west to east. North of Michigan Avenue, they're going east to west.
Just down and they did a good job.
And then a lot of people, especially people that worked for the Department of Public Works, their salaries were mostly paid by money that came from the stormwater charge. So those people were laid off, which of course impacts, services. DPW does a lot of things in town. Cleaning up garbage when we find it in the yard or a parkway or something, shoveling snow, plowing snow, all sorts of different things. So some of those people had to be laid off. We had to take money out of the street funds, which is, there's major street and local street, two different funds. Because we have a lot of funds, they're called enterprise funds, that means you can't take the money out of that fund and use it for something different than what that fund was created for. So that money can't be touched. So we had to find a fund that was not an enterprise fund to be able to make up the shortfall. And the street funds are what a lot of those, are the funds that a lot of the money came out of. So, and then we also had attorney fees for our defense. We hired Miller Canfield, which was one of the premier law firms in the state, and they had a Headley Amendment violation expert that we hired. Some people wonder why the city attorney's office didn't handle this case, but I guess the best analogy that I can make to you is if you had a brain tumor, you wouldn't go to a podiatrist. I'm not a Headley Amendment violation lawsuit specialist by any means. I'm a municipal attorney. So we wanted to get the best representation for the city, and that's who we went with. So unfortunately, it didn't turn out the way we had hoped, but she was a good attorney and she did try very hard. And then of course,
about $277,000.
let me look at my total. I have so many numbers running around in my head. You know what? I think I have it on the next slide actually. This is, we broke this down. Don't worry about what's up here. I ran down what we paid each month for buildings, but Holt is the original two cases. This is Jackson County and Jackson Coffee and Klein Brothers. That was the total. And let's see, I'm trying to, I haven't seen this since yesterday. Let me take one look at it here. Oh, well, here are the attorney's fees we had to pay the other side. These are easy to see. And then there are, this is the Panzica case here. These are the attorney's fees that we paid to Miller Canfield. So in the initial two cases, that was the total. In the class action, that was the total. Wisniewski, we handled that case in-house, so there really weren't any attorney's fees. We paid Miller Canfield for about probably an hour of the lights one time, and that's where the $505 came in. But so this is the grand total of attorney's fees that we paid to Miller Canfield, attorney's fees that we paid to the other side, and costs for the 4 lawsuits.
Why did Miller Canfield charge so much more than the other, than the plaintiff, the other attorney?
That is a little complicated to explain, but when you're on the defense of a lawsuit, it really is more of a burden than the person who makes the allegation. So a great deal of research went into that initial case. It is a very complicated legal issue, and a lot of research had to be done. And Court of Appeals attorneys who are specialists in arguing at the Court of Appeals are not inexpensive. But you don't want to send someone who's inexperienced on such an
Well,
important case.
technically, we paid less in attorney fees than other, because $265,000 is less than $282,000.
I'm looking at the 547. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
had to pay Jackson County's legal fees, so you add the $90,940 plus the cost that they spent, which was $29,000, almost $30,000. And then Brian Surgener made the $65,000 and the $79,000
Right.
plus his costs of $43,000 and $13,000.
Why with Ingham County so close, didn't those really high-powered, expensive lawyers figure that it wasn't gonna work?
Well, we had, no,
I couldn't tell you what sort of arrangement they might have had with their attorneys. I mean,
No, I'm saying with Ingham County,
You're talking about
this
both.
case, yeah, the whole.
we just called it Volt, but that's the county versus city, and that's Klein Brothers and Jackson Coffee Company versus city. It was the original case that dealt with the Volt issue, so we called it Volt. I wasn't originally gonna give this out to everybody. I just did it for my own information, but I thought maybe someone might appreciate looking at it tonight, so I brought it. So I apologize it says Volt, but I guess the last thing that I wanted to say about the stormwater case is that is a lot of money. No one's disputing that that's a lot of money. But at the time that the case was filed initially by the county, this was a source of funds to pay for needed services that the council had every reason to believe was a valid charge. And they were trying to protect that revenue for the citizens so that they could use that money for those services. So For example, $1.3 million a year, if you take that out over 10 years, you've got $13 million. So yes, some money was spent, but they were trying to protect a revenue source that would have provided a lot of services for you. So I'll leave you with that, I guess. Does anybody have any questions about the Panzeca suit that I might be able to answer for you?
With that $2 million that the city didn't have to pay back because of statutes or limitations, will there be further discussions on paying them back to the citizens? And businesses, nonprofits?
I don't think we legally can pay it back, is what I was told. And at this point, I will tell you, I worked extremely hard I did not believe in the decision of I went in front of council before I was elected and opposed the stormwater fee. And when the lawsuit was lost, I talked to several people about waiving the fee. I tried my darndest I talked to the largest largest payers of that fee to try to get them to minimize the damage to the city. The city's only required to pay back 1 year, and if we went back and paid back all of the funds, you would see a drastic cut in services. And most of the people that I talked to when those cards were sent out to have your option to waive that fee, people were confused as to what it really meant. And I truly believe that a lot of people, not all people, but a lot of people would have waived that. You had a question on it, you called me, and I answered it. That was a confusing process. So,
I can't say from reading some Court of Appeals and Supreme Court cases about the Headley Amendment. This is part of the law that we only have to pay back for 1 year. And the reason for that is, most of the times when these charges are instituted by different municipalities, they don't know at the time that this is an illegal tax. These are often a very close call with the courts. And I think that the courts feel it wouldn't be appropriate in the legislature to bankrupt the city over having to pay back every bit of that charge that they've ever collected. Because oftentimes, it wasn't anything that was done maliciously. Perhaps it was just, in the eyes of the Court of Appeals, a bad decision at the time. But they don't want to bankrupt anybody by requiring them to pay back all the money. That's why they've instituted this 1 year statute of limitations. Realizing that municipalities have a fiscal budget, you run on your budget, you can't just get money out of nowhere. You only get money 2 times a year. So that's the reason for the statute of limitations. That's something that the legislature and the courts impose.
What was that, the $2 million spent?
I'm sorry, what's that?
What was the money used for?
It was used for street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, leaf pickup, and
How much was the cost of it? I thought it was like 30-some thousand.
I know, I'm
No,
seeing
I
that
think
figure.
the leaf pickup is 130. Yeah.
I thought it was over 200,000.
Yeah, it's not 30. It'd be great if it were only 35,000.
Well, you gotta understand, the pickup leaves, they take some kind of big backhoe out there, and they have to go like this and scoop them all up, and then they gotta put them in a dump truck, and, it's a very time-intensive process, and, yeah, you gotta do that on every street in the whole city, so, that's a lot of man-hours, so it's a very expensive process. The dream is that we would have the money to buy the truck that sucks them up as you drive along the road, but hopefully someday we can
But
get
even
that.
with that said, putting your leaves in the street is against the DEQ or DNRs or whoever regulates that. It's a violation of the Stormwater Act.
It is, yeah, it's also
Purposely
a local
interfering.
ordinance violation as well.
It happens all over the state right now, but other cities do that. You know that, right?
Doesn't make it legal just
Other
because.
cities do.
Yeah, but just
Even if it
because
was
I shot somebody and
$100,000.
I didn't get caught doesn't mean it makes it
They're
legal.
shooting
So,
municipalities are not individuals shooting each other.
well, I'm just saying, just because it's not enforced in one place doesn't make it okay to not enforce it in another
It
place.
was
So.
$200,000, that's a long way, $2 million.
Well, but it was spent on other things than just that.
Well,
And-
it had to be spent for something for the stormwater.
Right, yes,
The
yes.
money could be used for itself.
The federal government requires the city of Jackson to take
I
certain
know what
actions in
they're I know what
relation to
they're
this.
requiring.
And it was in its own fund, and I'd be happy to get that information for you. Because it would
I
have
would
to
like to
have.
see it, I
Okay.
really would like to see it, because I think some of that money or something, someplace was.
Okay.
Okay, well, we're gonna move on to Administrative Hearings Bureau.
Question right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
stormwater person, and now that was obviously waived. And I think it was, I wanna say 60 or 70
It was about
thousand or
$70,000
eight, somewhere
total,
between
yeah.
60 and 80,000 dollars.
No, I certainly don't, it looks like Ms. Smith is getting ready to run what the city legal department, we certainly like to hear that. But is there going to be a chance where we can explore some of the other decisions that were made by council on this stormwater state, or?
Oh, no, you couldn't
I
ask.
want to give her respect to run her.
Oh, yeah, no, I'd rather have you
Okay.
ask the
That's all
stormwater
right,
questions
you
and then
can ask me
move on to
questions, like,
this.
I'm
Okay.
happy to answer.
Well, actually, I was wanting to talk to Ms. Schleck.
Oh, okay.
Actually, hear her.
All right,
opinion.
well, let's get into the Administrative Hearings Bureau. This is the city's Blake Court. When it first started, I don't know, it might not have been very effective, but we have worked very hard to make this a very effective court. And I think we're making a real difference in the city as far as blight is concerned. Some of the things that we cover in the Blake Court are housing code violations, noxious weeds, which is like your tall grass, inoperable vehicles, zoning violations, and garbage violations. So let's say you see your neighbor is starting to accumulate a bunch of garbage in the backyard. You give us a call, an inspector goes out, he takes a look, he takes a picture, we send him a notice, we say, please clean up your garbage in 10 days. We go back out in 10 days, if it's still there, they get a notice of violation to appear at the Administrative Hearings Bureau. This is a civil court, it's not criminal, so no one goes to jail for any of this, but you can incur pretty substantial fines if you don't come into compliance.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
My neighbor had set a toilet out in his front yard, and he right away the city and set it for 3 weeks, and I must have called him 5 or 6 times, and nobody ever showed up to do anything about it.
Well, I'm not sure, we don't have to get him, but
Call Mr. Hines.
You take care of it. That's a police department.
We'll get
And
that.
so I got a couch outside in my corner.
But we
Yeah,
call it the
I called
AHB,
them, make a
for
lot.
Administrative
They were
Hearings Bureau.
good demo.
And our goal is not to get your money. We don't want anybody's money. We want you to clean the place up. We want the house to be up to code. We want the garbage out of the yard. We want the inoperable vehicle out of there. That's always our goal. But sometimes people don't want to cooperate. They don't care what their house looks like. So then we go for the money, because that's the only way you're going to make them do anything. And we've been very successful in getting some substantial fines for people. I don't know if you guys remember, if you went out on Page Avenue, there was a junkyard out there by a guy, Mr. Kurpinski. Well, when I first started here, I said, I'm doing something about that junkyard. And I did, I went after that gentleman. We brought him to the Administrative Hearings Bureau. I got a $20,000 judgment against him. I went over and we seized his entire junkyard and we sold it. And fortunately, Omnisource bought the entire junkyard, so it made the case much easier. And they agreed to grade and seed the whole lot. So if you drive by there now, you just see a grass lot. But that's the kind of thing that the AHB can do. We go from little tiny things, like a junkie car in someone's yard, to a huge thing like a junkyard. So this is a really good tool for cleaning up stuff in the city. And I'm really proud of the job that we're doing there. We have some very good inspectors that work in the Neighborhood and Economic Operations Department. We've got some great staff that runs it. But, and we're doing a good job of getting compliance. But we do have a lot of cases. I think this month we're going to have about 150 cases. I spent a good part of the day there today. We had about 8 people per hour coming through there. And so, but things are getting better. The houses are starting to look better. We're seeing less instances of junky cars and junk in the yard, stuff like that. So, but it's a long process. It takes a while for the word to get out that the court is there, and you probably better clean it up or get it up with a big fine. So, but the process is, as I was telling you, you get this notice of violation, then you go to a hearing, and the first thing we do is we sit down with you and we say, okay, we see that you've got this junk in your backyard. When are you going to clean this up? And they'll say, oh, I don't know, but I don't have a truck. And you say, well, I'm giving you 30 days. If you don't have it done in 30 days, you're going to have a $500 fine. Usually they'll have it cleaned up by the time they come back in 30 days. And we normally don't charge them the $500. We'll give them a break. Because like I said, we're not after the money, we're after compliance. But people who don't comply, the way that we try to get them to take this court seriously, because many of them are repeat offenders, we do try to collect those fines and costs. We send them to a collection agency, we seize property. We had one gentleman who was a notorious slumlord in town, and we actually seized his car twice in one day, because he paid us the money and then we found out he didn't pay us enough, so we went back and got his car another time. We didn't have much trouble out of him after that, so. But, and that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the AHB and vacant lots. I know some of the lots are owned by the county through tax reversion, some are owned by city, and we've got stuff dumped there, so I'm wondering two things. How does AHB work with the county if there's problems on those lots? And if a vacant lot is owned by the city, do you deal with that issue as well, or what impact?
Well, we deal with that internally. A city property wouldn't come through the AHB because really we'd be finding ourselves, but you know, we try to get to those things as quickly as we can to get them cleaned up. The county has kind of a sweet deal. The state legislator said we can't take them through the Blake court. So all we can do is send them a letter and say, there's some junk on one of your properties, you know, could you please clean it up? And that's really all we can do, is just hope that they'll voluntarily do it. And I think most of the time they do, so.
What about the walkaway lots that most of the houses got demolished and people just walked away?
Those are problematic because in order to get somebody to the Blake court to talk to them about cleaning up their property, you have to give them notice. And you have to know who they are. And the walkaway property owners, you know, we spend a lot of time just trying to find a valid address for them. And we can post the property, and that's considered, you know, adequate notice under the statute for us to get a default judgment. But as I said, our goal is compliance, so just having a default judgment isn't going to clean the property up. We want to actually find that person, and we want to talk to them, and we want to say, what's going on over here? You know, what are the issues that's causing this to happen? A lot of times, they're not the ones that put the garbage back in. It's a vacant house, no one's watching, and it's become the local dumping ground. So that happens quite often.
Where does the money come to tear those houses down?
Where does the money come to tear the houses
Yeah.
down?
Where does the money come
Well, tearing houses down is a whole other administrative court that we have. That's called the Building Code Board of Examiners and Appeals. They're the ones that uphold the building official's decision that the house should be condemned. But that money comes from a lot of different sources. I'm really not the finance girl, so I don't know. But if you're asking about the new federal program, I do have some information about that I can share with you.
So how much does the federal government get to tear a house down?
Well, this is the way the program works. It's called Help for the Hardest Hit. It's a program that operates through the U.S. Treasury Department and MISTA, which is the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. They partner together. They pick a couple of cities to take money from what are called the TARP funds. Now, I don't know if you know what the TARP funds are, but these are when there were all the big mortgage scams going on, and there was a huge settlement. And they're trying to figure out what to do with that money. So they're taking that money and they're distributing it to certain cities to acquire and demolish houses. We're not choosing how this process is. These are the requirements of the program. We have to buy the property and demolish it. And we use our own funds at first, and then we upload all these documents into a server that MISTA provides to show that we have acquired it properly, we've demolished it properly, and we've provided a nice clean site at the end. And once we provide all that proof to them, they reimburse us that money. And we have $25,000 per property, and that has to be used to purchase and demolish. Totally.
And pay back taxes.
Yes, and pay back taxes, anything like that.
And administrative and your
Yes,
salary.
there's some
and all
administrative
the
costs there.
factors.
Our administrative costs that we can keep are limited though by MISTA. I don't remember the amount, it's a low amount though.
So how much is Jackson? It's 5.5?
Yeah, 5.5.
That's 5.5.
And I think they figure that's about 230 homes.
If we purchased about, maybe, it's a little bit of a guess, but I think about 90 properties so far. And it's a very detailed process. It's an interesting process, and all of us are learning something completely new at City Hall doing this, but I think it's going to make a huge difference when this program is done and the houses are demolished and we have these nice clean lots instead of, you know, these blighted homes that people are, beggars are living in and crime is occurring in, and things like that, so.
What will you be doing with these 230 vacant lots that the city will now own?
I actually don't know that.
The city has a contract with a mowing company. I think we've had two contracts, and I think I heard last night or sometime that we were adding contractual services to maintain
Will
them.
they be doing sidewalks too for shoveling?
For the snow, I hope so, but I can't answer that at this moment in time.
Yeah, I don't have that information. I don't know.
Go ahead, Mike.
We have demolition houses in Jackson, money in the city.
No.
We're not making money. The amount of work that goes into this program for for us, is
No, I
monumental.
mean, even if you do the math, I don't know what they're averaging on the purchase price. I could probably look on our MLS, our multiple listing
Well, I
service,
seen,
but,
I got one here,
okay.
I brought with me, and this is the fellow over on East Washington, City Council.
Right. So we're given 25,000 per house. We can't go over, no, the 25,000, we can't spend more than 25,000 per house, which includes purchase price, demoing, paying back taxes or liens on the property. He made more money than he paid for it. And every house has to be vacant when it's purchased. They can't even rent.
Purchased a house from her, that's
Yeah.
just what she's talking about.
Yeah, we won't buy anything that's occupied.
Go ahead, Jay.
Well, this was occupied, that's why I'm asking.
No, it was not occupied.
Well,
We wouldn't enter into a, we will not enter into
you
a
know,
purchase
there's-
agreement unless you sign an affidavit that says it's not occupied.
One of the advantages to this grant program is that there's been some folks, I have at least 2 examples, where they were unfortunate in a house fire. They were not insured, city was able to come in, take that over, buy them out, tear it down, and at the end of the day, when everything was covered, all the costs, they give the victim with no insurance, who was gonna walk away from that with nothing to their name. 3, 4, 5,000, whatever the bottom line was after all the expenses were cleaned out, they gave them what was left based on the fair market value of that. So it's actually been advantageous, at least in 2 examples that I know of.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that because
Pardon?
206, the one that burned?
Yeah.
I think
Is that
the problem-
what
I
you're
think
talking
that's
about?
one that was taken like that, that's on the schedule to be taken down.
I think we may end up saving a lot of property owners with houses that they just don't know what to do with because they're in such deplorable condition from having to deal with the house anymore and paying them a fair amount of money for it.
Well, Susie
I
lives
bought
next
one.
to a house.
Did you?
I bought this thing for 4 months, I finally got it. I redid it and I sold it for $6.5.
So,
We need more success stories.
right, well,
That's right.
Susie lives next to a house that the city had actually put an offer on, and there were a couple of owner occupieds writing an offer on it. It was a foreclosure. And actually a family won the bid on that with the bank, and so that one didn't get torn down and is owner occupied, and Susie can probably attest that, I think you told me yesterday that they're really active and excited about living in the community, and so it's not, the city isn't out to just buy houses and tear them down. They're limiting what they're gonna spend, and there's some rationale to the method to the madness.
Is there any homes that are worth, and a lot of them discussing, but is there any worth that you guys would have a company for the city come in and be able to tear things out of them for architectural salvage to make the city money? And then the city sells it? Because you guys used to have yours before your time.
That isn't
There was
something
stuff
that,
downtown that the city would sell, like used parking, the old parking meters and old signs and traffic lights and all that got sold like at this Summerfest downtown, and that would make the city money, all this crap that's sitting around.
that isn't
Well,
something
in the
that gets
vacant
sold now.
homes, there's a liability issue, from what I understand.
That's true. I mean, anything we sell, if someone gets into it, we're on the hook for it, so selling, salvage items might.
I mean, because
be a little bit of
Adrian's doing it,
liability.
Adrian just did it last summer.
Did they, we
Yeah.
went into vacant homes?
No, as far as like the used equipment, it's
Oh,
just
right,
like,
right.
the walk through not walk signs and all that, because there's guys bought a bunch of those.
Yeah,
But
I know,
the
yeah.
other stuff, I mean, it's like, and then just have one big sale, accumulate something, one big sale, and the city would have the money. I mean, at least it would recoup, maybe not a lot, but I mean, that's a big thing now, people love that stuff.
I can mention that to the city manager next time we have a meeting about the program.
I mean, just like I say, the old stuff that isn't used anymore, and then the architectural.
Well, I can
stuff,
tell you the
stuff
sign
like that.
department takes their signs down to OmniSource.
They sell them, I mean, they used
Well,
to.
yeah, I know, well,
They'll get more money then than they will on OmniSource.
right,
I mean, people pay some big bucks for that stuff.
yeah.
Well, did anybody have any other city attorney's office related questions for me or anything I can
John?
answer?
I just did have, it's not really a question, I'll make it short. Alluding to the question that just a gentleman asked, is like he said, he was asking about city lots being taken care of and everything. I think your comment was certainly not an issue, but council, your comment was, that, well, we do what we can, well, you know, and obviously the city has issues in that, but there's a lot of homeowners, and there's a lot of taxpayers out there that we have the same issues, so I just would like to see council maybe be a little more receptive to that. I mean, we both have problems on
I
both
live in the
sides of
city
the table.
myself, and on my street, there is, one house with some very tall grass. But, I can tell you right now, part of the issue is, we haven't been able to find enough mowing contractors who fit our criteria to be able to hire them to mow the lots. I mean, we had one company that had several, you know, people in it, which would have been great, but their criminal records were ridiculous. And I wasn't gonna allow a four-time felon to be next door to you mowing the lawn, so, yeah. So that's part of the problem that we run into, is finding people that meet the qualifications to be able to.
I think once you complain, like if you call and said the neighbor's house has tall grass, if you give the information to me, I let Tina know, and they're right on it. And they let the contractor know, the contractor has 10 days. So remember though, that someone's, I think it has to be 8 inches.
Yeah, 8 inches.
8 inches.
That's the max, yeah.
And so the contractor has a cone, they have to put the cone by the grass, take a picture, but by the time someone calls, it's already 8. They got 10 days to get out there, now it's rained, it's hot, it's humid, it's growing. There's a lot of owner-occupied properties that I've noticed that have really long, a lot of extensions, between the parking lot and the curb that
They should have, I think, either at the end of this week or next week, there'll be 2 new mowing companies that will be starting. We did finally find some people, so that's oftentimes a problem. Like, for example, with the garbage pickups, when we find someone has a bunch of garbage in their yard and we need to send somebody out to pick it up, we couldn't find anybody to do it. No one wanted this job. So finally we found this gentleman who said, yes, I'll do it, and we're glad to have him, but sometimes it's difficult.
Are the 2 companies local?
No, I don't think either one of them was local. Maybe in the county, but not city. I remember.
the rules in the city are the lowest bid. Unless we've had problems, we have turned down contractors who may have been the lowest bid, but we had problems with them, so we took the next lowest bid. So if there's performance problems, we have an exception there.
Yeah, we call it the lowest responsible bidder. That's the city's term for who we go with.
Has there been any discussion about opening up the service clubs? I know like a lot of service clubs are working on it in the last year, in the summer, to make money. To offer those lots for them to make money for the city.
No, that's a good idea.
I think
Not that I've heard of, but I think that's a great idea.
I think you were gonna actually hire some high school students to go and help too. They were working on
Well,
that.
I think they're doing that for the city parking lots and the
Oh, for the
maintenance of
city,
the city properties downtown. Because if you remember last year, our parking lot beds were awful.
But the issue, it's very diligently being worked on in the city. It's one of the prime concerns of the city manager right now, so we are trying to find a solution to the tall grass problem.
They don't want to change the subject, but what's happening with hotel trees?
There's a contract on it, the Hotel Hayes.
There's a development company, and they said we're interested in this property, but we need to do some investigation of it still before we can make a real commitment to buy it. So what we did was we entered into a 2-year option agreement with them. They have this 2-year period to decide whether they want to buy the property.
So it's time.
It is, and it's a very well, is it for $1?
It is, but they have to.
But it's, no, but there's time, if they don't do something by X period, then it expires. It isn't tied up like
What
the,
happens if somebody came along and
They
wanted
have
to buy it and it's tied up on purchase?
well,
For $2?
$1.
There weren't a lot of people looking at it.
no, I think
well,
that.
there were a lot of people, but they weren't qualified people. They wanted the city to pay them to develop it. Well, heck, if we had $2 million to develop it, then we probably would have had.
Who was the other group that came in and
Gillespie had an option on the parking lots. He did not have one on the Hayes Hotel.
But we have seen photographs of some of the developments that this development company has done in other cities, and they're pretty impressive looking, so.
Oh, yeah.
If they do decide to buy the Hayes Hotel, I think.
It's a company that has
what
a
they-
good track record for success. recommended by a local business person.
Or would you take $1 on the purchase agreement?
Well, I gotta tell you, I have to tell you, maybe we should open it up for people to see what the inside of that hotel looks like. It is, since they turned the heat off and we've had 2 brutal winters, it is sad. It's very, very sad.
Now, I see that parent parking lot over there.
Huh?
Are they gonna redo that?
Yeah, they're redoing that.
And that is that part of it?
That is part of the people who are developing the hotel will pay parking for parking permits just like every other business owner downtown Jackson does.
You say they got purchase agreement for 2 years, so.
But there are milestones that they have to meet.
Okay, well, we'll say they meet all the milestones.
Okay.
They meet all the milestones, and in 2 years, they decide they don't want to do it. And they basically give it $1. And we got a parking lot that's being used that way. And somebody comes along and says, you know what, we want to enlarge that park, so let's tear it all out. We put all this money in this parking lot.
Well, it may make it more attractive to a new prospective investors though.
It's called speculation. It sounds like.
Well, I don't know.
Speculating on our business here.
Well, okay, so let's go to the Tim Rogers article on MLive now. I'm a firm believer, I'm not gonna believe everything I read in MLive because I know what they write about the city and I know they only print what generates comments from the bloggers.
Well, I'm not,
And,
I'm not saying much, but I'm just using.
No, but Tim Rogers said that Jackson County is not development ready for companies to come into this community. And what Jackson is trying to do, the city of Jackson is trying to improve what it looks like so we can get people
I
here.
understand what you're saying. But at the same time, you're speculating that something's gonna happen. We're gonna spend all this money in the parking lot.
Right?
Are they gonna put the roof on the hotel these too?
They are.
Okay, so, it's, if I'm not mistaken, if we back up the time, remember, you roof on it, and they tore it down. That was awful way.
Well, I mean, you do need a marketable property in order to.
Well, I understand this, I understand this, at the same time, you have to have enough. Actually, explain to the thing, we'll do these things, provided you buy it. But if you don't buy it, I mean,
But we have to, so if we don't do something with the Hayes Hotel, it needed a roof. If we don't
I
preserve,
understand.
but if we don't preserve that building, it's gonna get to a point where you have to tear it down. And I, for one, am not in favor of tearing the Hayes
So
Hotel
you're
down.
in
I think
favor of the
it's,
$80,100.
I'm in favor of
You're-
saving a
you're in
signature
favor of
building.
the parking lot.
I'm in favor of development in downtown Jackson. I'm in favor of a vibrant community that we all want to live, play, work, and stay in. And we cannot just sit on our hands and do nothing and hope that somebody's going to do something, because we can see how well that's worked out for us so
We've
far.
been putting money in downtown, I'm 63 years old. And I remember back when I was a kid, they started putting money in downtown Jackson. Downtown Jackson started to die. The 994 corridor came through because no traffic would come through the city.
Okay?
And the new Jackson is Blackman Township, it's fucking okay. That's where it's at, that's where everything's happening. So, how you, Blackman Township used to be a little more friendly with businesses in Jackson, city of Jackson. And it seems like everybody flocks over there. I had a situation where I had a piece of property in Swan's Ice Cream. This is a few years back. Swan Ice Cream, I would buy 4.5 acres of property I owned in the city. And they come out and they looked at it. After they dealt with the city, they just withered away, man, and they were gone, just like that. Where's it at today? It's right on 94.
Right. Well, I have no control over what
I'm
happened in
just
the past.
saying, we keep dumping
We
money
can
in
learn from our
downtown,
history.
and maybe we got the wrong people on the front lines.
And maybe you did back
You
then.
know,
You can go
maybe-
back to the 80s and find a lot of problems that have led up to today.
Lord, we have right now, man, he gets out of his car, he got, he brings under his load, he goes up there, and gets on the front counter, and rolls them out, and you get the wrong person coming in the box.
And I don't agree
They
with that.
roll up, they stick it under their arm.
And I don't agree with that. And anytime I find out about about issues, I jump right on,
What about
and I'm trying to,
tax?
well, and we're trying to educate people as to the changes in the city. Now, the city is not perfect. By any stretch of the imagination, we are not there yet, but we will get there. And but we have to start somewhere. So, but I appreciate, and I'll give you the information on that. That's a good question. I'd like to see it now that you bring it up.